Hey, what's up, y'all? So after this past weekend in boxing, decided to talk a little bit about the fights. They had Carl Froch, George Groves. It was a good fight. Groves caught Froch with a good 1-2 in the first round and dropped him, almost finished him in that round. Froch recovered, and then later in the fight, um, I don't remember what round exactly, but Froch ended up pulling out the TKO victory. And at the time the fight was stopped, I think it was around 9 or 10. No, it was one of those rounds. It was late in the fight. The commentators, they didn't have Froch winning any rounds except round 5. I had given Froch round 2 and 3, not 2 and 3, but 3 and 5. Rounds 3 and 5 I gave Carl Froch. And yeah, they were both hurt. Both he and Groves were hurt. They were trading shots, and Grove had covered up and was moving away from Froch in the ropes, and then the referee grabbed him, stopped the fight. And I had never heard so many boos, or so many boos that were that loud after a fight before. I think those have to be like the largest number of boos, as well as the loudest I've heard after a fight. For those of y'all who didn't see the fight, y'all can go and watch that. And Froch, he tried to play it off, but Groves showed that he deserved to be up there, and he definitely deserves a rematch. If Froch don't give him a rematch and tries to, just brush it off like he did the Andre Durrell fight, then that means he don't really deserve to be where he's at. They also had the Pacquiao Rios fight. Now it's a fight nobody expected Rios to win. Y'all know I did a video, and I gave reasons why Rios had a better chance than most people were giving him. That doesn't mean that they were reasons that Rios was going to win. It was just reasons why he had a chance coming into the fight, but they're not really reasons where, it's a definitive saying, okay, because of this, he's gonna, do good against Pacquiao. None of that. But we all know that Rios is an opponent they picked not for anything special, but because they say he hits hard, and he's been knocking people out at 140. He comes up to 147. They're like, we need a guy who can test Pacquiao's chin. There's now, they're saying Pacquiao passed the test, but he didn't even take the test because Rios ain't landed nothing. They had Pacquiao fighting scared, like Amir Khan. Amir Khan in his fights, because he's so afraid of getting knocked out, he'd come in, throw a flurry, then get out, basically try to run from his opponent. And Pacquiao did look like Amir Khan. He'd come in, throw a flurry, get out, and come in, throw a flurry, get out. It wasn't really any boxing. He was just throwing punches at Rios, landing what he could. Nothing different from what we're used to seeing from Pacquiao. And me personally, I don't think Pacquiao's done or washed up or faded or whatever different. I already said that on my other video I did after his fight with Marquez. I don't think Pacquiao is finished. This was just a fight, like a rebuilding fight, like how they had Cotto fight Delvin Rodriguez, since he just came off losses to Trout and Mayweather. It's a rebuilding fight, like Khan fighting I think it's Diaz and whoever his last opponent was, his last two opponents that he just had after losing to Peterson and Garcia. Those two guys, it's fights like that. Got a fighter coming off some losses, they want to rebuild him, they want to hype him back up, get him back up to the point where people are saying, yeah, he's elite, he's this and that. And You know, what's funny is all the Pacquiao fans are talking about, yeah, Pacquiao looked great, etc., etc. But, you know, everybody likes to talk about Floyd Mayweather cherry picking people. They never talk about Pacquiao cherry picking people. And it's kind of strange because, you know, Mayweather, since he first won a world title, there's only two people he's fought coming off a loss. And that was Zab Judah, who lost to Carlos Baldomir. And at that time, people were saying, well, he should have fought Baldomir. Baldomir's undisputed champ now. He beat Judah. Why is he fighting the loser of that fight? And Brian Kenny asked Mayweather that on ESPN. So, you know, Mayweather beat Judah. He had his fallout with Bob Arum because I guess Arum didn't want to pay him money that he owed him for the Judah fight. You know, they had to fall out. He left Top Rank. And, well, the whole issue there was Bob Arum. He has said that November, I think it was the 12th, it's 2006, that's when he was supposed to fight Antonio Margarito. And Arum said that Mayweather wanted Margarito. See, he wasn't even thinking about Baldomir, you know, who had just beat Judah. They were talking about Margarito. And Arum said Mayweather wanted Margarito, but then after that he wanted to fight Miguel Cotto and Ricky Hatton for a guarantee of $10 million. You know, there's $5 million guarantee for each of those fights. And then he said that Mayweather wanted Oscar De La Hoya, and he wanted a $20 million guarantee. And Arum said that those fights couldn't happen because those fights wouldn't generate enough money. So Mayweather left, and on November 12th, where he was originally supposed to fight Margarito, since Margarito was still with Top Rank, Mayweather just left. Him and Arum aren't on good terms. It wasn't going to happen. So it went back to Carlos Baldomir. That's who he ended up fighting. And, you know, became the lineal champ there at 147. The other person he fought coming off the loss was DeMarcus Corley, who was coming off a loss to Zab Judah. So Judah lost to Baldomir. Floyd beat Judah and Baldomir. And Corley lost to Judah. You know, Floyd beat Corley and Judah. That's the only two people he fought coming off a loss. Besides that, since he first became a world champion, he hasn't been fighting people coming off losses. They've been coming off streaks of wins and KO wins, and there were people who were top contenders because, you know, he's the champion, he's holding the belt. So he was fighting people who was ranked in the top 10 contenders for whatever belt he was carrying. And, you know, if y'all are interested, there's a site that shows, you know, the boxing rankings for the different sanctioning bodies, you know, WBC, WBA, WBO, and IBF. And it's fightnews.com. They have the list of you know, fighters that each sanctioning body has rated. You know, they got WBC, IBA, and it's who they have ranked, you know, from the number 1 fighter to the 15th. They have the champion, and then it goes 1 through 15, so it's actually 16 people. And it's for every division. And Fight News, of course, they have their own list they put off to the side, but they listed the rankings that that the different sanctioning bodies have, so you can see, you know, updated, like a current list of people who's ranked today. But, you know, back to my point, you know, Mayweather is fighting these people who's ranked near the top, and they're coming off wins, KO victories, you know, of at least, you know, 2 or 3 wins or more. And those are the dudes that he's fighting. You know, when he came back from his 2 years off, people said it was stupid for him to fight Marquez, you know, because Marquez was ranked #2 in the world. He was the #1 Mexican fighter. And Marquez had called him out after he beat, I think it was Julio Diaz. He said, well, you know, Pacquiao doesn't want to do a third fight with me after, after I got robbed twice. So I'm going to fight, the best fighter out there, which is Mayweather, and I want to do it at, either 140 or above 140, at welterweight. So he called Mayweather out, for that fight at a catchweight. And Mayweather's like, fine, okay, I'll fight you. And oh yeah, this is also another thing. You talk about Mayweather and Pacquiao and catchweights. We got with Mayweather, Juan Manuel Marquez is the one who called him out. He said, I want to do it this way. And Mayweather's like, okay. And now we just had, Canelo Alvarez, who has said he wanted it at 150. And then, you had that guy Suleiman. I think he's like president of WBC or WBA, whatever. He's like, yeah, Canelo can do it 150. We'll do the catchweight with Mayweather. They had Canelo's trainer come out in the interview and say, yeah, Canelo can make 150 easily. We'll do that. Because I know Canelo wants to fight. We got to do it with Mayweather. And that's what happened with that. And then, it brings me to this thing about cherry picking with Pacquiao. We got Freddie Roach on interview numerous times, saying why, they pick certain opponents. So, here's the first one. Eric Morales was on interview. This is what he had to say.
Were you yourself as a trainer a little bit guilty of taking Morales a bit lightly?
Definitely. I thought, you get beat by Barrera, then he takes a tough fight with Pacquiao right away. I says, oh, this guy might be just doing it for the money. This is probably his last fight. And going out that way. I underestimated him, yes. And
so you hear Freddie Roach, the first time they fought Eric Morales, like, yeah, Eric Morales just came off a loss. He's probably just doing it for the money. It should be an easy fight. Let's go ahead and take it. And it turns out they were wrong, and Morales ended up beating Pacquiao. So, and this is the interview after the fight. After that, we got David Diaz, who Pacquiao fought after his second fight with Marquez. And here's what Freddie Roach had to say about why they picked David Diaz.
And you think that's a good measuring stick, Diaz? Because there's not a lot of secrets. He's pretty straightforward, comes forward, strong guy.
Front right, little dog ring and he's a southpaw, man. He doesn't really like fighting southpaws that well. He's hittable. He's usually when people are hittable, man. He does pretty well with those things from that style, but
Seeing with David Diaz, Freddie Roach is like, yeah, Manny doesn't like fighting southpaws, even though Manny is a southpaw. He said, but David Diaz is hittable, and Manny tends to do well against guys who are hittable, which is why they started fighting guys who were hittable after the second fight with Marquez. From David Diaz, Oscar De La Hoya, Hatton, Cotto, Clottey, Margarito. From 2008 till 2011, that's the guys he fought. And those are all guys who are very hittable. And that's what led to Pacquiao looking bad against Mosley, Marquez, and Bradley when he fought again, because those are guys who weren't standing there right in front of him to be hit. This also brings us to Oscar De La Hoya. See what Freddie had to say about Oscar.
And the thing is, I I trained Oscar for a fight, and for Oscar to come down to 147, I think he's going to struggle. My guy's fought 4 times this year. Oscar hasn't fought 4 times in 4 years.
Right.
We have an advantage in putting the punch. There's no doubt about that in my mind. And I think activity and speed. And the only thing is Oscar just can't pull the trigger.
That's right.
So you hear them say that, Roach say that he's trained Oscar and that for Oscar to make 147 he's going to struggle. He also said that, since Oscar's not been active and Pacquiao's had 4 fights that year, Pacquiao is going to have the advantage of being active, or if Oscar hasn't. Then he also said that Oscar can't pull the trigger anymore. So that's why they picked him for an opponent. Now we got Ricky Hatton. Let's see what Roach says about that.
Obviously, Hatton's a lot younger than De La Hoya was. You think he can still pull the trigger?
Oh yeah. He's not the same guy that he was before the Mayweather fight. I think the Mayweather fight took some out of him.
You said that it's his speed that will make him win. What about his skill?
His speed and his power will make him win, and his overall game. He's a much better boxer than Ricky Hatton. Ricky Hatton has terrible footwork. His chin's up in the air. Keeps his hands low. I mean, I've been studying this guy for 2 months now. I'm tired of watching tapes of him, but he doesn't belong in the ring with Manny Pacquiao, in my opinion.
So you hear him say Ricky Hatton isn't the same fighter before fighting Mayweather, because the Mayweather fight took something out of. Ricky Hatton was an undefeated dude who ended up getting knocked out by Mayweather. And then he's also saying that Ricky Hatton, he's going to be easy to knock out because he he comes in with his chin up in the air and all that stuff. And interesting, that reporter asked, what about Manny's skill? And Roach says his speed and power and overall game is what's going to do the job against Hatton. So I'm just like, wait, hold on. You asked what about his skill. He didn't say that Pacquiao has skill. It was just his speed and power. So, that's something else that you should take into consideration, that it's not that Pacquiao got skill, it's just the speed and power, which is all Roach trains him in. Roach doesn't train defense. He doesn't train making adjustments. But, I'll save that for another time. Here's what they said about why they fought Cotto.
Right. Okay, how about Miguel Cotto? I mean, Miguel Cotto obviously has a comeback fight in February. Size-wise, there's not a big difference. Maybe in frame, but in height, that looks like a lot more competitive fight for Manny. And realistically, with Cotto having his fall out with Margarito, there's a lot of questions laying around him. How about that fight?
Yeah, that's one I haven't really thought of, but he's definitely a possibility. I would definitely fight Cotto, without a doubt. That'd be a great fight, actually. And, obviously a dangerous fight for us, but that's what it's all about. I mean, change doesn't, we have no fear. So the thing is, I think that'd be a good fight for me. Yeah, that'd be very interesting.
Yeah.
The big thing right now is he's the same fighter that he once was since the fight with Margarito. How much did that fight take out of him? He took a lot of punishment in that fight. He hasn't really looked that good since that fight.
And you see Freddie Roach talking about, Cotto hasn't looked that good since his beginning for Margarito. So that's another reason that they took the fight. He also said that there was no fear. After Cotto, they fought Clottey. See what he says about Joshua Clottey.
He has good defense. It's passive. It's two ways to passive. That works well in the amateurs, and his guys can't score points, but there's no counter punch off that passive defense.
Right.
So he waits for you to finish your combination, and then he throws.
So he picked Clottey because he doesn't throw punches back until after his opponent is done throwing punches. Basically, Clottey is a guy who's afraid to trade shots. So that's why they picked him, because they knew that nothing would be coming back at Pacquiao, and Pacquiao could just outwork him. Now here's why they picked Antonio Margarito.
All of Manny's fans are calling out, and they want to see Manny get in with Margarito. You ever thought about that fight?
I've thought about it. I don't think so. You know, a lot depends on how Margarito looks when he fights Shane, of course. But realistically, though, you know, he's a big 47-pounder in his prime right now. I just don't think that's a great fight for us at this point. I thought Oscar was, because of his age and his last couple performances weren't that great for me. But you know, Margarito, he's.
Yeah, now I'm gonna stop that interview for a second. See, because you know, Freddie Roach brought up another point why they fought Oscar's, because Oscar's age, and because he would have trouble making that weight. But you know, I'll let this continue.
I'm a brave guy, but I'm not stupid. So I think I think it was just that was a little bit too big a step. I think Manny's gonna knock him out inside of 8 rounds.
Yeah, and when he just said that Manny would knock Margarito out inside of 8 rounds, you know, this was during the face-off with Max Kellerman.
I saw your last 2 fights.
And when Roach said that, I saw your last 2 fights, you know, Margarito asked the questions like, you know, what's this dude talking about? Is he crazy? And he's like, no, I saw your last 2 fights. You ain't look good. So yeah, Manny is gonna be able to knock you out, you know, within 8 rounds, because you've been looking like crap. Now that's basically the reason why, you know, Roach said that, and that's during the face-off with Max Kellerman. And you know, you see Margarito's face. He didn't have a response for that. And this is why next I'm gonna pull up the interview where they tell why they fought Shane Mosley. And keep in mind, Margarito's last 2 fights before Pacquiao, he got KO'd by Shane Mosley, and then had a tough fight with Roberto Garcia. But here's why Freddie Roach said they chose Mosley, and they talk about Mosley getting turned down twice because he wouldn't come down to like 142, and Mosley ain't been below 147 since '96, and this was in 2010.
Shane came to my gym twice to negotiate the fight with me. I said, Shane, can you make 142, 143? He says, no. I said, well, okay, there's no fight. He says, you fought Oscar at 147. I said, you're not Oscar.
What do you mean by that?
He's better than Oscar.
Freddie, can you make a comment about Pacquiao and the matchup with Shane Mosley?
Well, you know what? Does anyone really care about that? Is that telling you ticket? I mean, really, Shane looked pretty bad in his last fight. I don't know. Business-wise, it makes sense. You know, I'm definitely excited about it, you know.
So you hear him say that the reason they wanted Mosley to drop back down to a weight he hasn't been at for 14 years is because he's better than Oscar De La Hoya. And that's the funny part. You know, he told Shane Mosley that, you know, he won't fight him because he's better than Oscar De La Hoya. He won't fight him at 147. And I did another video called Pacquiao Ducks People, where I brought this up. He said he won't fight Mosley at, you know, 147. So instead, he fights Joshua Clottey at 147, who's about the same size or maybe even bigger than Mosley, and younger than Mosley. He fights him at 147. Then he fights Margarito at 150. But, you know, they're like, if Margarito's easy anyway, he's going to get knocked out because he got knocked out by Shane, and then he had another tough fight. So yeah, we'll fight him at 150, no problem. And then finally, they fight Mosley at 147 after Mosley, lost to Mayweather, and then didn't look as good in his fight after Mayweather with Sergio Mora. They ended up getting a split decision draw, and then Pacquiao was like, okay, or Roach, he's like, okay, Manny can fight him now. But here's why they picked Marquez when they fought him the third time. Here's what Roach says about that. Whoops. Guess the audio's out on that. But what Roach was saying is, Marquez is a lot older, and he's smaller than Pacquiao, coming up in weight, and Pacquiao's been at 147 longer. So basically that's why they thought that they would win that. And let's see, I think also got here it is. This is him talking about why they want to fight Tim Bradley.
Step away from the superstars. Tune-up fight. Who would be a good tune-up fight if he's waiting for one of these superstars to step up and challenge Manny?
Well, Timothy Bradley's making a little bit of noise. He's talking about fighting his first. He's still a little timid and too. He's got a tough fight style. He's pretty boxing. But, it's not that deep with it. Bradley's only anything off the top of my head.
So he said, that Bradley would be an easy tune-up fight. That's why they decided to pick him up as an opponent. So you see that, Bradley is undefeated. He wasn't coming off no losses, but it's a guy who they're like, we should steamroll through him, so that's why we're gonna pick him. And then I think Roach is gonna talk about cuts.
Get an edge if I could. You can just go to just taking away something as they want it. The thing is, I'd like to get him down in weight a little bit, make him work to get down in weight a little bit. Because only weighs 42 as a weigh-in, so 40 is a more natural weight for us, of course. And we need, Floyd's a talented guy, and if we can take something away from him, we will.
So you just heard him say why right there with the cuts. He's talking about cutting weight, so we like to make him work. We like to take away something from him. We hear that. He said Floyd's very talented. We're gonna take away something from him if we can. So whenever it came up with Rios, in the first episode of the 24/7, you hear Freddie Roach say he's not gonna put Manny in a fight that he knows Manny can't win. And nobody, like I said in the beginning of this video, nobody expected Rios to win, because they knew he was too slow. And like I said, Manny just, went Amir Khan style on him. And got in, got out, threw flurries when he was in, moved out the way. Nothing really super accurate. And for fighting a punching bag, Manny only landed 36%. So yeah, 36% against a guy who doesn't have a defense and is slow. How is he gonna land even up to 36% against a guy like Mayweather, who's not slow and actually has a defense, probably the best defense in boxing right now? That's something you got to think about. And I look at this quote from Freddie Roach, where he just said, it was a article Kevin Iola with Yahoo Sports wrote, and this is what he had Roach quoted as saying. Mayweather is, I think, slipping a little bit with his age and so forth. He can't move like he used to. He doesn't use his legs like he used to. He doesn't have movement. He's not as fluid. He stays on the ropes a lot more. He exchanges a lot more, and I think that would benefit Manny Pacquiao in a fight. And I'm thinking Alex Ariza must have kicked him pretty hard, because it's like that just erased 2013 from Roach's memory and reset it to Cinco de Mayo weekend, 2012 last year. Just he kicked Roach so hard, it reset his memory to the Cotto fight, because that's the stuff people were saying after the Cotto fight. Anyone who's seen the Robert Guerrero fight, anyone who's seen the fight with Canelo, knows that Floyd's legs are not gone. If they've seen how much he was moving in that fight, to where people are talking about he was running. See, and that's the thing that I was saying before. In his fight with Mosley, Mayweather said he would stand in front of people. He was going to stand in front of Mosley, take it to him, and he did that. And that's when Roach started with Mayweather's legs are gone. Against Ortiz, Mayweather said he was going to stand in front of him. He did. Against Cotto, Mayweather said he was going to stand in front of it because the fans want excitement, so I'm going to give the fans excitement. He did. And people were like, Mayweather is old, he can't use his legs. So he was off for a year, comes back against Guerrero, and danced around the ring on him. Like, how often was Mayweather even on the ropes in that fight? He wasn't. He was barely on the ropes in that fight. And they said that he was running. They said he ran. So your legs can't be gone if you're running. It's either one or the other. Y'all got to make up your minds. And you see it with the Canelo fight. He was dancing on Canelo. Like, he even still had enough energy left, in round 11, or was it 12, to where he was able to stay away from Canelo. People started booing, and Canelo just stopped moving and looked at him, put his hands down like, man, I can't catch this guy. He moving too fast for me, man. Forget this. I'm done. And then Mayweather's like, oh, okay, I'll be nice to you. I come within punching range. And then, like, moved over to him and, stood in front of him for the rest of the round. So I'm just like, they just came back and picked Brandon Rios because, they've seen it as an easy fight. And you're hearing all this talk about Mayweather and Pacquiao gonna fight. Don't believe that. Don't believe it. This is not something that's gonna happen anytime soon. If it does, it'll be a surprise. But considering Mayweather got 4 fights left, if he fights Pacquiao now, who else is there for him to fight? Because he can't even make 154. He's not going to fight nobody at 160. The most he's weighed in the ring is 150. He ain't going to fight nobody from 160. Those dudes walk around above 180. Dudes at 154, they walking around at 160, 168. Some of them above 170, and they fighting at 154. Mayweather, weighing 150. And in the ring. Before the Canelo fight, his Uncle Roger was saying that Floyd was walking around at 145. So that means like this dude had to stuff himself to get up to that 150. Because he burns off weight just from being in training camp. And that's the way a fighter should be. That's how you know a fighter's at the natural weight. When they go into training camp and they lose weight just from being in there, to where they can go in at the weigh-in and they at the right weight. That's how you know they're fighting at their natural weight. Now, and then when they come into the ring the next day, when it's the next day and you see that they weight's only changed like 2 to 3 pounds, that's another reason they're at the natural weight. Other dudes who fighting below their natural weight, you see they rehydrate 10, 15, 20 pounds. That's how you know that they're cutting a lot of weight to make that weight. But, all this Mayweather Pacquiao talk is just because they're trying to hype Pacquiao back up, get his pay-per-view sales back up. And I wouldn't be surprised if the pay-per-view sales for for that fight in China ain't did that much anyway. But you know, that's all my thoughts on that. Y'all take what you want from it.